In this video today, we are going to talk about what Scrumban is and what some of the practices that you have in Scrumban. I'll be the first to admit here that it took me a while to wrap my head around what Scrumban is. So let's take a look at that. Let's start with what Corey Ladas, the person that defined Scrumban back in 2008. According to Corey, it has to start from Scrum. Scrumban. So you take Scrum and then you put Kanban's principles and values onto Scrum. That's what is Scrumban. Scrumban isn't a simple hybrid of picking a couple of things in Kanban, a couple of things in Scrum, throw them together, and you get this mix. It actually has a specific way to it. In other words, you start with Scrum, and then you move towards Kanban. Now, you're not going to go all the way to Kanban, therefore it stays in Scrumban. Why would anyone want to practice Scrumban? Simply is that Scrum has certain preset things in it, very well defined, right? The 353, the 3 roles, the 5 events, and the 3 artifacts, right? In itself, what I found in my own experience is that it is not enough. And that's the beauty of Scrum. Scrum is a framework that allows you to put stuff onto it to make it even better. And this is where I believe Kanban is a perfect mix to it. So you may see yourself as Scrum, like me, but then we added Kanban practices. So we don't walk away from Scrum. We're still a Scrum-based team, but we have additional practices from Kanban that helps us to deliver value better and faster. Why don't we just do Kanban? Why do we have to do Scrumban? Another valid question. Now, what I do like about Kanban is that it's the simplicity of Kanban and its values and practices allow anybody to adopt Kanban where they are at. Now, this looseness of guidance and things like that, whilst it's principle-based, it actually does not serve a good guide for beginners. So I see a lot of teams failing to deliver when they adopt Kanban, right? Even though they are doing stuff, right? Their throughput may be high, but they're not delivering true features and functionalities. So the combination of it to me is a perfect mix. Now there are teams that can't do Scrum, so therefore you have to do Kanban. Now a lot of times I do see teams that do well in Scrum that eventually move to Kanban. Now, when they go through those journeys, we see a very high-performing team. Now, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day, right? Whether you're Scrum or Kanban or Scrumban. What matters the most is that you're delivering value. So what does Scrumban look like? Well, you do Scrum. You still do your same thing, right? You have your 5 events. You do all those things. So one of the things that I often see that we do add to it is this concept of visualizing work. Kanban has that, right? What does that mean? It means that we have a way to see how work flows. So most of us will probably see this before and we won't realize it. It's a Kanban board. It's a sprint board, right? You got a sprint backlog that you committed work to, and then along the way you have this states that you move to all the way to done. That itself, if you can visualize that, then it is a way of visualizing work, and it is from a practice in Kanban. If you look at Scrum and you go through the Scrum guide, it doesn't tell you that's what you're supposed to do. Okay? So that's one example. Another simple principles from Kanban that you can put onto a Scrum team is this. If you see your Scrum teams burn down, you see kind of it goes straight and it kind of like almost like a waterfall, right? At the end of the sprint is when people start closing work. Put in WIP limit. Okay, what WIP is, work in progress limit. It's basically limiting the amount of work in progress at a specific stage. So this is an easy way to control the flow so that you don't get a waterfall, so you get things done up front. So the goal is to finish, not start. Kanban is about flow. So in one way of doing flow is to do a pull versus a push. So we pull work instead of pushing work in. So whenever we see that we don't have enough work, right, we look and say, is there anything I can do to help somebody else out? Or if there is none, then I decide to pull work in. Okay, I don't simply keep pulling work in and then throwing my work over to the testing team, for example. What that does is it creates a push or pushing work to the testing team. And that in itself is a bad thing in Kanban. It also causes what we call another instance of a waterfall as well. In order to enable flow, you have to have enough slack, right? So you can't do too many things at the same time, and you can't do too big of a thing too. So in this instance, one of the principles here to apply is ensuring that your stories are the right size. Anything too big, you may, let's say for a sprint, if you only have 2 stories in there, you probably have too big of the work. So you want to reduce it. So what way can we cut it down into more of a manageable size? So flow, right? Enabling flow is making sure that you have slack. So in that instance, that you want to make sure that things are small that can carry too, not too big. One of the things we constantly talk about is delivering value. What does that mean? Value means doing the right thing, and not just doing things right, but doing the right thing. In other words, you're delivering value means delivering the right thing. And how do you do that? Well, you have to prioritize, right? So part of getting work into your flow in Scrum is ensuring that the right thing goes into the sprint and it flows appropriately. And this is not only just at the sprint level, right? So we want to look up lean or lean system thinking, for example. We want to look at a system as a whole. Think about the epics that comes in. Think about the initiatives, for example. Anything that is bigger in terms of that, right? We want to also flow. So one thing at a time comes to mind as you look at that. One other practice that I have in place is that in order to reduce waste of overproduction, right? In Lean, we have that. So in Scrum, when we do backlog refinement, we only refine stories enough to fill up to 3 sprints worth of work. We don't go more than that. Anything more than that is considered overproduction in my mind. It's a waste, so therefore we don't need it. So when is it not Scrumban, right? So if you think about it, Scrum, Kanban, we're kind of somewhere in the middle, right? We're moving things. We take Scrum, put common practice. When does Scrumban break? When do we get to a point where we say, you know what, it's no longer Scrumban, we're now in Kanban? What does it look like in real world? Simply, go to grocery stores. Let's say if I'm stocking milk, for example, I'll always make sure that I have 10 bottles of milk on the shelf. If it goes less than 5, I put additional 5 in, right? So that is the concept here. So once you get to that point where you're doing that, where you're no longer even thinking about sprint planning, right? Oh, I finished work, I need more work, I need to refine those work. You're just in time. That's when you're now moving away from Scrum and you're in Kanban. So as you can see, there's a lot of components in Kanban that you can put into Scrum to make it Scrumban. So every implementation of Scrumban is very different, right? My team of Scrumban is very different than your team. So what I like to know is if you are practicing Scrum, if you have some of the Kanban practices in place, let us know in the comment below what are those practices that you use and share it with everybody else.